Hey guys. Oh, Bari Weiss. You really did double down, didn't you? You guys remember, Bari Weiss is the editor-in-chief of CBS News, who pulled a 60-minute story by correspondent Sharon Alfonsi and her producer Ariana Zill off the air just hours before it was broadcast Sunday night. It was about the infamous CCOT prison in El Salvador, which is notorious for human rights abuses, okay? She came out today with a message to CBS staff aimed at sort of quelling the controversy of her decision. We can sort of call it a Christmas Eve address, right? I'm going to read it to you with some thoughts of my own. Weiss said the majority of Americans say they do not trust the press. Quote, "It isn't because they're crazy. To win back their trust, we have to work hard. Sometimes that means doing more legwork. Sometimes it means telling unexpected stories. Sometimes it means training our attention on topics that have been overlooked or misconstrued. And sometimes it means holding a peace about an important subject to make sure it is comprehensive and fair," she wrote. Such editorial decisions can cause a firestorm, particularly on a slow news week. And the standards for fairness we are holding ourselves to, particularly on contentious subjects, will surely feel controversial to those used to doing things one way. But to fulfill our mission, I like that part, it's necessary. We're out to inform the American public and to get the story right. Restoring the integrity of news is a difficult task. We can't think of a more important one, she continued. Let's read that again with some footnotes, shall we? It isn't because they're crazy. To win back their trust, we have to work hard. Sometimes that means doing more legwork. All right, let's start with that. To win back whose trust? The public's trust? They don't trust 60 Minutes? The public trusts 60 Minutes. Trust me. They don't trust Fox News. They don't trust the White House. They definitely trust 60 Minutes, most of them. I mean, they were raised on 60 Minutes. Everybody in this audience was watching 60 Minutes from the time they were a kid with their parents near the television set every Sunday night. It is the most trusted broadcast institution ever, okay? So when you're talking about the news, you're talking about other stuff. You're not talking about 60 Minutes. Sometimes it means training our attention on topics that have been overlooked and misconstrued, and sometimes it means holding a peace about an important subject to make sure it's comprehensive and fair. Yeah, I get you. You want to make sure it's comprehensive and fair. You go find another news magazine or any news organization that spends months on a story, making sure it's comprehensive and fair. Now, what you really mean is that it's not comprehensive and fair because the White House and ICE and Homeland Security and state didn't get their say in the story, but they were asked over and over again to sit down and talk about what this story might mean. They didn't do it, Bari. They didn't do it. And you think they should have tried harder at 60 Minutes. Let me tell you something. It's not their responsibility to try harder and harder and harder and harder. It's the responsibility of those organizations to have their communications people tell their people, this is really important. It's going on 60 Minutes. It's not like your college newspaper. It's not going to get lost. It's going to be all over the planet. So yeah, they might have wanted to sit down with 60 Minutes and tell their story, but they didn't. And that's not 60 Minutes' fault. You somehow think that everybody should have a speed dial to the White House with a personal phone number to the president or your friend Stephen Miller. You know, that's not the way they work with 60 Minutes, because they know when they talk to 60 Minutes, they're on the record, and they know when they talk to 60 Minutes, they're going to have to be truthful and honest. They don't want to do that. That's why they don't return the phone calls. But we ask them anyways, over and over and over again. I remember that because I worked there for 15 years, and we saw it happen over and over again. People wouldn't return phone calls when they were scared they were going to get caught lying or when they were doing things that were criminal. So being comprehensive, it's a two-way street, Bari. Tell your friends that. Such editorial decisions can cause a firestorm, particularly on a slow news week, she said. A slow news week? This is the week that more Epstein stuff is coming out. That's not a slow news week. Every other day, it seems like they're blowing up another Venezuelan boat or taking over another ship. You think this is a slow news week? We do not have slow news weeks anymore. Sleepy Joe Biden is gone. Those were slow news weeks. We're in the Trump administration, burn everything down news week. So no, we're not in a slow news week. Standards and fairness we're holding ourselves to, particularly on contentious subjects, will surely feel controversial to those used to doing things one way. Just say it. You're talking about 60 Minutes. And the reason they do it one way is because they're good at it. It's not the wrong way. It's the one way. You know, it's kind of like if you had a car and you're trying to change the oil on it, you wouldn't start in the gas tank. You start with taking off that little oil filter. It's the one way. They're used to doing it the one way because it's right. It's the right way of doing it, Bari. And you don't know that because you have no experience in broadcast journalism at all. Zero. Look your own resume up. We all know that. We are out to inform the American public and get the story right. Tell me what was wrong about the story. Name a fact that was wrong about the story. You watched it twice. You haven't been specific about anything about this story. Nothing, except you thought the White House and those folks should have more say. They didn't return the call. We know that. So they could have had their say. They chose not to. What else? You wanted it more contextualized, right? That's what you said. It needs more context. Let me give you some context. The deportees interviewed in the piece were beaten. One talked about being raped, not by inmates, not by guards. This particular inmate did not have any criminal record whatsoever before the Trump administration sent him to El Salvador, a country he's never been in. He's Venezuelan. You sent 200 plus Venezuelans down to an El Salvadorian prison known for human rights abuses, beatings, killings, rapings. The American government did that. So I would like to know what context you think that story should have. Tell me what more context you need. You want to have Stephen Miller coming on there and saying, and by the way, I'm not against Stephen Miller being interviewed. I would love for people at 60 Minutes to put that guy in the chair and ask him why he thinks sending people who have no criminal record to be beaten and raped in a El Salvadorian prison run by a dictator, why do you think that's a good thing? Tell me. Nobody wants to not have Stephen Miller in the chair. Trust me. Everybody wants him in the chair. He doesn't want to be in the chair. Not with 60 Minutes correspondents. He wants to go on Fox News and all these places with these sycophants of the administration so that he can make his case to people who don't know how to ask questions. Give me a break. Again, these guys weren't raped by inmates of MS-13. They were raped by prison guards that we employed by paying them a fee to hold these people. You have to ask yourself, objectively, is the American government responsible for that? I would love to ask Stephen Miller and Donald Trump that. Let them pontificate about that one all day long. Again, this inmate had no criminal record whatsoever. More context, because you think the story needed more context. You held it, right? According to the story, which aired in Canada because you, Bari, were too dumb to understand things like releases and clearance in foreign countries. So you didn't get it off the air fast enough. Now it's kind of all over the place because of you, by the way. Only 48% of the 200 Venezuelan deportees had any criminal record at all. It's like a quarter, like 1/4 of them had any criminal record. And they were being sent to a place where they were told, you're never going to see the light of day again. As soon as they arrived, you're never going to see the light of day. There's some context for you. What do you think? What's Steven going to say about that when we get him sitting in the chair? I'd love it. Let's do it. You know, get 60 Minutes to get him in the chair. I want to watch that episode. Non-criminals. Again, many of these deportees were going through the legal asylum process or refugee status process to live in the United States when they were deported. More than 50 of the men as legal U.S. residents who entered through official channels such as refugees or parole programs and had their status revoked without due process. And you can argue whether that's legal or not. The Constitution says it's not. Everybody in the country has a right to due process. The administration's spinning it another way, but the truth is, Scalia and Ruth Bader Ginsburg, both on opposite sides of the political spectrum as it came to being Supreme Court justices, agreed that everybody in the country has a right to due process. And Scalia is not exactly Mr. Sweetheart when it comes to conservative politics. He was hardcore. According to research collaborated by 60 Minutes, using ICE data, ICE's own data, only 8 of the 252 men, approximately 3%, Bari, had any conviction of a violent or potentially violent offense. So yeah, the story needed what? More context? That was in the story. What more context do you think it needs? Be specific. Don't be like the Trump administration. Just call everything fake news. Don't just come out and say, you know what? We think it needs more of this and more of that. Be specific what you think the story needed. You're insulting 60 Minutes staff by saying they didn't do their job. You have no idea the kind of stories they do and the places they go. Sharon Alfonsi, I met her in Baghdad. You spent a lot of time there? Psh, you're pathetic. And you signed the letter with like 3 other people at CBS because you're scared to be out there on your own. You know what you did was bullshit. And all these other people nobody you've ever heard of that signed a letter with you, the public doesn't know who they are, right? Most people, all the sycophants that work with you now, no. If they were real journalists, they'd put the story on the air. They would have. You're not a real journalist. Go look at your page, the kind of stories you do on your own, what is it, daily news? It's a joke. And maybe people should research the stuff you said about El Salvador recently, how you talked about how it would be a funny little campaign stop for people for the midterms. We know how you think. Don't sit there and tell people on Christmas Eve. By the way, you're undermining your own journalists. You're undermining 60 Minutes, an institution that's been around 58 years. And these people are full of awards and full of accolades that you will never, ever, ever have. Ever, ever. You're at like the peak of your career at 41. You got given a job that you don't deserve and you never, ever earned. And you're blowing it, man. You're blowing it. Let me tell you something else about bad news. When you fuck up in the news business, you take it. You apologize and you tell people how you fucked up and you're not going to do it anymore. If you don't do that, the story just keeps rolling. Trust me on that. Trust me on that. You're not a very good person and you're not a good editor-in-chief. It's a title you have, a made-up title or whatever. You're no good at it. I'm sorry. But like what you said today was outrageous. Attacking the institution of 60 Minutes, right? About once every 15 years, they make a fucking mistake. And you think it didn't have context. You have no idea the depth by which they do stories. You should go spend some time over there. If you can do it, I'd wear like a flak vest, frankly. Thanks, guys. Oh, by the way, here's George. Right, George? George is in the writer's cabin with me tonight. Come here, buddy. George doesn't like Bari either, frankly. You guys have a merry fucking Christmas.